Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rabbi Stephen with this week's 10-Minute Torah. I would like to start off by thanking everybody that participated in our worldwide wrap. Sorry if you missed the notification. I'm going to do my best to take steps going forward to make sure that everybody gets notified of these events. I would also encourage you, as I send out my weekly email, let's take a look at it. Just glance at it. I typically have, in a chronological order, some of the things that are coming up. Typically on Tuesdays at 7:30, we do our Torah study. And unless there's a board meeting or some other event, on Thursday nights at 7:30, the Grabiners will typically lead their adult education. Right now, we're doing Midrash. Every now and then, once a month, that's interrupted for our monthly board meeting. And every now and then, I'll get on and I'll do something specific, like maybe talk about Purim or Passover is coming up or something else. And of course, Friday night services are at 7:30. Saturday morning services, Shachrit, are at 10 o'clock. And Sunday, we have my two Hebrew school sessions, 10 o'clock, in which we do some Hebrew and we do a little Torah study for the kids. And then at 10:50, we'll go for 40 minutes, then we'll have a 10-minute break. 10:50 to 11:30, we'll do some other things like some prayers, some famous Jewish people. And for some people, for some kids that are just getting started in the Hebrew, I have kind of an early session before those two sessions for about 10 or 15 minutes. And things come up. So that's kind of the weekly schedule in a nutshell. Please, again, look at my emails and you'll get notified. And if you have any questions, call me, text me, email me, whatever. Also, I'm typically in the office Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays between around 9:15, 9:30 to about 1, depending. Sometimes I get there a little earlier, sometimes a little later. Next week, of course, is President's Day. So we'll have the office closed on Monday, and Sunday there will not be Hebrew school. So hope that clears it up. Okay, so let's talk about Mishpatim, this week's Torah portion. And Mishpatim follows on the heels of Parashat Jethro, in which we were introduced to the Ten Commandments. So the last of the Ten Commandments is thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's anything, right? And somebody asked me once, I was doing a kids service, and the young man asked me if the other commandments, the other 603 commandments, are outgrowths of the 10. And I would submit that they are. Those 10 are very important commandments. In a sense, they're also broad categories. So that being the case, this last commandment about coveting really kind of sets the stage for what we address in this new portion as we follow the flow through our Torah, which is the beginning of this religion that we call Judaism. So what does it mean to covet someone else's house, their grass, your neighbor's wife, your neighbor's kids, your neighbor's car that they just bought, or any of their other things? All right. It's one thing to maybe be jealous or maybe be envious of what somebody has, because in a way that can be a good thing. And the good thing means that you're going to go out and you're going to work hard. That old expression in the 60s and 50s, keeping up with the Jones, or in our case, keeping up with the Steins. Remember that movie? Because you want that as well. And that's good. That motivates people. That gives you incentive. A little bit of competition is always a little good. But what coveting means is not that you want something like what your neighbor has. You want that. You want that thing that your neighbor has, not like it, not a similar, not maybe he's got a Porsche 911 and you want whatever the next step in the Porsche is. I don't know. That's what that means. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to steal. I'm going to take what my neighbor has. So part of what's involved in this particular portion talks about theft. If you steal neighbor's cattle, if you're caught breaking into your neighbor's or your fellow's house to steal from them, if your neighbor leaves something with you on your agreement, of course, to watch something while they're away, and that thing gets injured, if it's an animal, or it gets destroyed if it's an article, what are the consequences? So the Torah does, God, of course, the Torah does a good job of compensation, of making it up, right? So we use God's laws of justice. And what is justice? It means that everything in the end, like our Sabbath song, even though the evil seems to flourish, the doom is sure to come, because yours is the ultimate triumph. So it talks about the idea of divine justice applied to earthly matters, civil and criminal courts. And that's all about compensation. Within the framework of compensation for injuries, we have what's known as lex talionis, the law of the tally, the law of retribution, or as we know it in common parlance, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, life for life. Now, as Dr. Joseph Hertz, Rabbi Dr. Joseph Hertz, who edited our Sonsino Chumash, points out in one of the articles between the books, he talks about Moses' law compared to the code of Hammurabi. Hammurabi, I've never really learned how to pronounce that. But this Hammurabi was a Babylonian king, I believe, that had his own code. And it was the first attempt, at a codification of the law, because basically back then in the ancient times, the law was whatever the king or the prince in charge thought it was going to be, right? So here was an attempt at justice. So eye for eye, tooth for tooth, limb for limb, leg for leg, life for life was taken literally in the Code of Hammurabi. All right. And it got really out of hand. So if your neighbor's son walked through your house and something happened to fall off the roof and kill him, what was the penalty? The penalty is that your son died. It was that literal. And of course, as Jews, we see that as an abhorrence. I mean, that's horrible. You're punishing an innocent person for the crime or the accident, as it will, to make things equal. You're punishing somebody for something else did, but because it fit into that framework, sorry, that's the way it is. In Judaism, we would never even think of doing that. Some people, we talked last week in our Torah study about the idea, one of the commandments, that God visits the good things to 1,000 generations, but to the evil, he visits that to the third or fourth generation. And people say, that's horrible. How could God do it? Well, he doesn't. Remember, folks, Torah is not meant to be taken literally. I have to emphasize this because we get into trouble. Not we get into trouble, but people look at the Torah and they misinterpret things because they look only at the verse. They don't look at the 18 Talmudic principles that the rabbis developed in order to really analyze Torah. And I want to make this distinction too. And as you can see, I'm a little passionate about this. I want to make this distinction too. Okay. The idea of Torah is it's like, as one of my mentors, Cantor Joe, told me, it's like the layers of an onion. It's not, we don't analyze Torah to find things wrong, but if you do happen to find something seemingly contradictory, you investigate it, you go into it, and you use these various principles to help you understand. One of the principles is context, and that's the principle that takes front and center in our particular portion. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, life for life was never meant to be taken literally. Just like when God says, I'm going to visit, the evil onto the third and fourth generation, that's only because the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. If someone grows up in a household where people are evil, then that's what they're going to learn. That's what they're going to do. And it may take 3 or 4 generations to get out of those evil ways, to change those evil habits. That's what that means. It doesn't mean you get punished just because what your parents did. It means that be careful. It's a warning. Be careful that, you got to listen to your parents. You got to honor your parents. Yes. But you don't. But if they tell you to do something wrong, like steal or break Shabbat, you don't listen. You do what's right. Similarly, when you look at the laws of eye for eye, tooth for tooth, life for life, you will see that it is within sections that talk about compensation. All right. If somebody steals from you, there's compensation. You have to pay back double. If somebody accidentally ruins something of yours that they were left in charge of, they have to replace it. It's compensation. either money or replace the thing in whole, make the person whole. That's what eye for eye, tooth for tooth life is. It's about finding the value of that thing, of that bodily function, and compensating it for someone. If you've made them for life and they cannot go out and earn the living that they could have, guess what? That's on you because you created it. You need to compensate. Doesn't mean if you knock out somebody's eye, you lose an eye. Especially back then, 3,000 years ago, how would you even begin? We didn't have the medical techniques even to begin to do that. And what if you pull out somebody's eye and they bleed to death and die? Now what? Now you lose your life because it gets ridiculous. So that's why it's about compensation. The Torah is about justice. It's not about getting even. It's about justice. It's tzedakah. So Mishpatim. So let's remember that. Thank you very much. Happy President's Day. And remember, we have a new month. So next week's services are going to be a little bit more involved. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Thanks again for participating in the Worldwide Wrap and for listening to my Devar Torah.